If you have not followed his Triple H Horse Racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the HHH Racing Podcast, episode 319. I'm your proud host, Howard Kravets. Thank you very much for joining us for a very brief but important show where I want to talk about something very big that happened this week. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button at the bottom right-hand side of the screen, hit the notification bell so that you know when new content will be uploaded, and also smash that like button. And what I'd really like for this particular episode is below the video player. I'd love to hear what you have to say. This is a taped episode, of course. So below the video player, please comment on anything we're going to talk about here in this very brief, but what I feel like is a very important episode. Of course, you can follow me on X, on the name tag there at H Kravets, and scrolling in the bottom of the screen will be my email, hkravetshorse@gmail.com, plus our upcoming shows next week. Our next one will be Tuesday, the day after Christmas, December 26th, special show, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, Santa Anita opening day preview show. It's really going to be a lot of fun. Let me go ahead and take off the banner and tell everyone why we are here today. Of course, you can also listen, by the way, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. We've got tip sheet below the video player, and we also have a great website. A lot of you know the drill already. We also are on Instagram as well. But let me get to the reason why I'm recording this today. As you can see by the title, that might have alarmed some of you. When someone says goodbye and thanks, you're like, what's going on? I mean, Howard just had a show this past week with Pete and Paul. Everything sounded great. Everything seemed like it was on the up and up. And it is. The goodbye and thank you is to one individual and one particular podcast. And that individual is Matt Berner. And the podcast is the Matt Berner Show on In the Money Media. Let me take you back a little bit to some history. Matt Berner, of course, most of you know who he is. If you don't, you probably haven't not been watching horse racing on TV or listening lately. He does a fantastic job currently on FanDuel, NBC Sports, and also does work for In the Money Media. Although this week it was announced that his role will be reduced a bit on In the Money Media. I've been a big fan of Matt for a long time. I've listened to him for a good 9 years since he started doing podcasts with PTF, Peter Thomas Forental, on In the Money, and he expanded his brand per se to many other places. And in the last 3 years, Matt has had a show on In the Money Media, an autonomous podcast called The Matt Berner Show. He has had 184 episodes. He just finished his 184th episode this past week. And in what was pretty surprising news to me, he does a good job of keeping things sort of, hidden under the rug as well as PTF. Matt Berner announced on part 2 of his podcast that came out, I believe, yesterday, as I'm filming this on Friday, the 22nd of December. He informed everyone that the show will come to a conclusion, that he is putting a stop to the show for many reasons. You can listen to the pod, and I get it. I fully understand it. And hopefully Matt and possibly, Peter Thomas Forental and maybe other people at In the Money Media will hear this podcast. So people are wondering, okay, where do I fit in to this equation? Why the goodbye? Well, I became a big fan of the Matt Berner Show and of Matt in general. And I consider us good friends now. I'm sure he'd say the same. We keep in touch. We text. We talk about things other than horse racing. Just a great guy. I don't have enough good things to say about Matt. I think most people that have met Matt and know Matt feel the same way. But in terms of me specifically and the HHH Racing podcast, Matt Bernier used to have a segment on his show called the Friday Feature. And if you've been a fan of Matt Bernier or the show on In the Money Media, you might know what I'm talking about. The Friday Feature was a contest, actually, where Matt would have a podcast, usually came out on Mondays or Tuesdays, and they would do a short preview of races on Friday, of the following Friday. And he allowed guests, or just listeners, I should say, to guess which horse would win a particular race. And you put the guess of who you thought would win the race below the video player. And the winner, whoever won or predicted that race correctly, would have an opportunity, a chance, no guarantee, have a chance to go on and be a guest on Matt's show and handicap some races with Matt in a taped episode that he would show on the Matt Bernier show. I thought this was a pretty great idea. Matt had 184 shows. I probably listened to them in full, 160 of them. I missed very few Matt Bernier shows. I enjoy the content. I think he does a great job presenting material in a very uh, good way. I really appreciate the numbers and analytics as a math teacher. I especially appreciated those segments on his shows. Anyway, I digress. I decided to participate in some of these Friday features. This is way before the HHH Racing podcast had started, or I had even thought about doing a podcast, frankly. And I was fortunate enough, actually more than three times, but three times I was fortunate enough to be a guest on the Matt Bernier show. This would be in 2020 and 2021. And in fact, if you look below the video player of this video, in the description, I have put links to my three appearances on the Matt Bernier show if you're just curious to see what they sounded like. And I will say first, I greatly apologize to everyone out there for the sound because it was awful. And that has nothing to do with Matt. I was talking to my laptop. It sounded like I was in a swimming pool. I think the content was good and our conversations were great, but the sound was not great coming on my end. Completely my fault. Anyway, I was on the only three-time guest on the Matt Berner show, and it went very well. And I have journalism background as well, as I think many of you know back from college. And I've done some broadcasting work, audio and video, way back in the day. Again, way before the podcast. And I always wanted to be a broadcaster. And after I got some good responses from the Matt Bernier show below the video player, like for example, I like this Howard guy. He seems to know what he's talking about. It was entertaining, blah, blah, blah. Most of the comments were good. That gave me some confidence. Uh, I always thought I was a pretty good handicapper, but it gave me confidence to be able to possibly talk about horse racing on a bigger scale other than just with my friends on the phone or at the OTB. And I thought, you know what? Let me give podcasting a try. Maybe I can do this and have my own show on YouTube. And in January of 2021, my last appearance on the Matt Bernier show, and you can, if you go to the link below and you can click on it and you can see the end of my segment, I told Matt, I'm like, you know, Matt, just for fun, I'm going to start my own a YouTube channel. Now, at the time, I had no idea what I was doing, especially from a technical standpoint. Uh, I had to learn a lot about podcasting and etc. But the reason for this video is to say thanks to you, Matt Bernier. Thanks to you, PTF, Jonathan Kitchen, Drew Coatney, all of you that had any involvement with having Matt Bernier doing a podcast, because I think it's very safe to say, ladies and gentlemen, that if it were not for the Matt Bernier show and him giving an opportunity to have just Joe Schmoes like myself and perhaps many of you out there to participate in the Friday feature contest that he had, and which allowed me to be on the show with Matt, I'm not sure the HHH Racing podcast would exist today. And close to 3 years later, here we are. Life can take strange turns, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but the path that has led from the Matt Bernier show to this podcast, the HHH Racing podcast, has been unbelievable and just loads of joy. And so here we are. Uh, in fact, I think it's probably safe to say that some of you didn't know I even existed in this world until you saw me, perhaps, as a guest on the Matt Bernier show. And I'd love to hear your comments below the video player. Was the first time you saw me, the HHH Racing podcast, or did you see me on the Matt Bernier show? Because obviously he had very good viewership throughout his years. And so that sort of vaulted me on and encouraged me and inspired me to do the HHH, which, by the way, stands for Howard's Horse Handicapping, for those of you that actually didn't know what it meant. Inspired me to do the HHH Racing podcast. Not only that, Pete Visco, my wonderful co-host, was also a guest on the Matt Bernier show as a Friday feature handicapper. And I believe, as Pete and my other wonderful co-host, Paul Halloran, have said before on our show, that's how they got to know me, or that's how they at least saw me, was on Matt's show. So, folks, I'm not going anywhere. The saying goodbye was saying goodbye to the Matt Bernier show, which has officially ended on In the Money Media, although Matt has said that he will be doing more work for In the Money Media. I'm sure he'll be on their, players podcasts, and he'll be on In the Money Media plenty as well. But the goodbye and thank you is goodbye to the Matt Bernier show, and thank you. Thank you for giving a guy like me an opportunity to come on to your show, to make myself known, and most importantly, give me the inspiration and the confidence to do what I believe is one of the best shows on YouTube and on listening platforms going right now for horse racing podcasts, the HHH Racing podcast. So again, please comment below the video player on any thoughts on the Matt Bernier show or its connection with this show as well. But we are very excited to bring you incredible coverage, new shows coming up, new content, and we're just going to keep growing and growing here in 2024 on the HHH Racing podcast. Thank you very much, everyone. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, happy New Year, whenever you're going to be watching this video. And we hope to see you down the road very soon on the next episode of the HHH Racing podcast. Take care, everyone.
Howard Kravets, if you have not followed his Triple H Horse Racing podcast, you're missing out. It's one of the best podcasts in the country.